And so the yes and just says suspend it for a while, because the real truth about that is sometimes the best ideas are not the first one, two, or three, but the fifth iteration out. And yes and one of the improv principles just gives time to explore another iteration.
Welcome back, everybody. We're joined today by Michelle James, founder of the Center for Creative Emergence. She's a seasoned creative process facilitator, coach, and author who has worked with thousands of entrepreneurs, leaders, and groups over the past 24 years to unblock and focus their creativity towards inspired aims and objectives. Known for her dynamic learning environments, she uses whole brain creativity and applied improvisation to improve her clients in generative ways of thinking, being, and interacting and serving a greater good. And she's going to help us with some hacks on getting creativity from yourself, and if you're a leader of people, from your team as well. Michelle, welcome. We're so excited to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
Anthony, how are you doing?
I've been looking forward to this conversation all week. So, Michelle, glad to have you here.
Too. Thanks.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. So tell us a little bit about the Center for Creative Emergence. That sounds really cool. I'm interested to find out more about what that is.
Oh, sure. Well, it's a company that I founded about 20 years ago, dedicated to whole brain, kind of whole person creativity, working with individuals and groups. And it's using our signature is using whole brain methods to get practical results. So business bottom line, new solutions, new directions, anything, new ideas, products, services, instead of doing it just kind of left brain dominant way of approaching it, we first go into the divergent space and use all kinds of pattern breaking methods to get there, and then go into convergence, which is more strategic.
That's a very interesting sort of line of work and a fascinating way to kind of try and get results out of people. How did you end up there?
Well, it's a confluence of things, but I'll speak to sort of two of them. One was when I first got out of college, I got a job at a radio station, and I was selling radio advertising and writing radio copy. And I was having so much fun creating the ads. And that inspired me to go out and sell more. And because I was doing a really good job in sales, they had a consultant come in and they said to the company, you need to get all your good salespeople and have them only do sales, and then let everyone else do the creative. And so what I noticed was, as soon as I didn't have the creative connected to it, my sales went down a lot, dramatically. So I realized I needed to do work, creative work that brought me alive, in order for me to reach goals for myself and business goals. And so that was part of it. And I started exploring it. I took every different kind of creative, I got into improv theater, I was doing arts, I was doing all kinds of things and trying to merge it. And that merging took a few years. But then I met a guy who was many years older at the time, and he was kind of starting his own business than I was, and he had come from an organizational development background, and he became a mentor to me, and I wanted to bring creativity in the workplace, so we co-created a company. And in the act of doing that, realizing we were very different people and we were different generations, so we had a lot of different ideas. So one of the things that I noticed would be, we might have a similar goal, but we had very different approaches on how to get there. So vying for whose approach we were going to use created a strain and a struggle. And so we started exploring different ways on how do we get to a third way, something that's going to contain what's important to you and your ideas and what's important to me, rather than compromise. How do we get into co-creation? And I started realizing that was an emergent process. And I started kind of writing down ideas and thoughts about how co-creativity emerged. And then he actually retired. He had to leave. And that's after that, I started the Center for Creative Emergence, focused on that. And I basically work with different people on different projects, do a lot by myself or bring in others when needed. But with the structure that we want to co-create in a way that adds adds value, that you each person brings value that's added versus compromise. So that's one of the short versions.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could take a minute to explain, like, the difference between you said convergent, you said divergent, and you said emergent, and how do they all fit together into like the puzzle?
Oh, that's great. I love it. So, in divergence usually means you're going to diverge out of the norm. You're going to go into new territory. I like to, through the lens of creative process, I like to think of it as, you're mining the creative playing field. So you start yes anding, to use an improv term, building on ideas. You suspend judgment for a certain amount of time, not indefinitely, but like we're going to go in divergent. And you start exploring and going into possibilities thinking, going into framing differently, imagining what ifs, and not worrying about the constraints of the actual project you're working on or goals. And you give a certain time period for that. So you're diverging out, and all ideas are welcome, added, built on, and it's a very accepting space. Then, after that, so now you have more ideas. You've now created and generated many more ideas than you would have had you not gone there. So now you have all these ideas, and you're saying, okay, now we got to make it real. We got to make it applicable. And so you go into convergent space. You bring the constraints back in, often constraints like time, budget, parameters. And then instead of it being just yes or no, you can look at an idea and go, okay, that idea looked one way, but now that we have this certain constraint or parameter around it, how can we modify and shift it without losing the essence of a good idea in converging? And that's when you think of time, budget, goals, steps, and then eventually you break it down into steps. And then you might diverge out again when you start testing it and exploring it and seeing how it works. And then you come back in. And so it's a constant process of refining, adapting, narrowing, expanding, and narrowing. That's divergent convergence. Within that, emergence happens at different times. One of the hallmarks of emergence is that it contains surprising, it's unplanned for. There are things that are unplanned for in emergent. Oftentimes, something will emerge that emergence is thought of as the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And so you have two parts together, and instead of adding them 1+1, it's kind of like multiplying. If something new happens that you didn't expect and anticipate, that can happen anywhere along the creative process. But in order to get to sort of a next level emergence, or where something emerges that's workable and useful, it's helpful to spend time in diverging and converging. Now, some people will put divergence, emergence, convergence. In my experience, emergence can happen anywhere along the way. It can happen in the beginning. It can happen in the ideation phase. But it's something new emerges that's greater than what you had before, but contains it.
Right. And is that something that you'll sort of see as, I was thinking you're in the divergent space, you're getting everybody to come up with whatever idea, like the sky's the limit. And then you might combine 2 or 3 of those ideas, and you've never had considered that combination before, right? Like that is an example of an emergent phenomenon.
Yes. So that could be an example of an emergent, like it comes to you to combine different ideas, but what comes out of those ideas might spurn on, like, so you combine these two ideas that you might never have thought of. And then as a result, something new emerges from that you didn't expect. There's a lot of times what it's been my experience, the biggest challenge to getting into the what I call the emergent space, where you're kind of is allowing yourself to be a bit in uncertainty and the unknown. And so it's allowing yourself to hold ambiguity, to say, let's play with these combinations. Let's see how they work. Let's put these three together. They've never done it. Let's put these two. Now let's add this. You're doing that playing, and then eventually something will emerge that you didn't expect from it. But if we limit what emerges to our current conscious knowledge, we aren't going to get anything new. We just get it kind of repackaged. If we allow a little bit of ambiguity and we're adaptive with it, something truly new can emerge.
Totally makes sense. That's really cool.
One of the things that you mentioned earlier was about trying to get people out of left brain thinking and then sort of into more whole brain. And so for the people who might not understand exactly what that means, can you kind of talk about the difference between sort of left brain function, right brain function, and how bringing those things together can help you in a sort of creative sense?
Sure. And I'll preface it by saying there's some controversy. Some neuroscientists break it down into left and right brains, some don't. For the purposes, it just makes it easy and accessible to talk about because they are different creative functions of our brain, whether they're literally housed in the left brain or right or integrated. So left brain thinking tends to be more linear, lists, planning, structure, words, something following something else. And right brain tends to be, more of that imaginative space where, like in a dream space, you might have a dream in your dreams, you might have things that don't make sense in a linear fashion, or all of a sudden you get an imagery, huge in the right brain, movement, something coming out of nowhere, intuitive hits, the aha moments, things like that. And so a lot of times, if we don't give space, if we only engage a creative process analytically, we don't get into the convergent space where the right brain can really go active. Right brain really plays in the convergent space. It's making, and the right brain makes connections to things that we might not normally connect. And so what happens in a lot of our business cultures, we tend to start and go, okay, here's the data, let's analyze the data, let's decide what we're going to do, and all of that. And what I'm saying is a yes and to it. Sometimes that's enough and that's all you need. If you want more creativity, if you want something new and novel, you need to go more into the divergent space, which is a very right brain space. So there's storytelling, left brain data, facts, great to have. This isn't an either or, it's a both and. And sometimes when people tell stories, you can extract meaning from stories that data and facts alone don't have. Same thing, doing applied improv to help get ideas in the workplace. You can extract ideas that just analytical thinking alone doesn't help. So it's both imaginal thinking with analytical thinking, right brain approaches and methods with the left brain. So together you get richer and more novel and unexpected ideas.
You mentioned using improv as a kind of vehicle for getting into that more imaginative thinking. And I'm curious, Anthony and I both come from a background of software engineering. I feel like most software engineers are very analytical, very data driven. So not so much in that sort of right brain. How could you suggest to us and other engineers how you would use something like improv as we're trying to solve a technical problem to try and expand thinking into that right brain?
Well, so there's a whole field that's been emerging called applied improv, which is applied improvisation, using principles and practices from improv theater and applying it to work goals, objectives, whatever you want to create. People are using it in universities and business corporations and government agencies, and are applying it to leadership. So there are many, many ways to do it, but one of the hallmarks of improv is there's some principles that improv works really well in the divergent space, like yes and. So in improv principles, accept the reality someone gives you and add something new. So if you took a time for, the next 15 minutes, we're just going to yes and ideas, or where, it's kind of fits in divergent space, you will get more ideas 100% of the time. This is 100% of the time. It's never not true. If you take time to go to yes and build on ideas rather than yes but. So most people enter yes but, because what yes but means, yeah, but I don't see how that's going to be a good idea for what we're trying to accomplish. And so the yes and just says suspend it for a while, because the real truth about that is sometimes the best ideas are not the first one, two, or three, but the fifth iteration out. And yes and, one of the improv principles, just gives time to explore another iteration. There are several other key improv mindsets and practices, and also a lot of the improv games allow you, they're designed in a way that you can't check out. They're designed in a way you can't check out, that you have to be fully present. And by being fully present and in the moment and hearing what someone else is offering it and adding something new to it, all kinds of things can emerge. They call it creativity within constraints, because improv is actually very constraint oriented. There are rules. It's not just sit around and randomly ideate. It's ideate within certain rules. And sometimes you act it out. In the act of acting something out, physically, you come up with a whole set of different ideas than you do if you're just thinking them. And you could try this out yourself. You'll see it's really amazing. If you think of something, you'll come up with one set of ideas. Visualize it and imagine it, that you are it. You'll come up with another set, and then act it out. You'll come up with another set. So that's just a very small sampling. I will just say, what you see on television with improv theater is the goal there is entertainment, performance. It's improv for performance. Applied improv, what I've worked with engineers and in government agencies and in the workplace, is taking some of the applicable principles and practices and then applying it to real world product service development goals.
And it sort of sounds like why you can speak to why a business should do this. Your sales experience in the early days, and when the creativity kind of was lost, the sales suffered. So maybe you can speak to like the importance from a business perspective, why you need to blend left and right brain in your product or your advertising or your marketing, whatever.
Sure. Well, I'll start with, I know this from working with engineers that I've worked with in the past, that sometimes many of them have to do presentations and present to other groups. And one of the things that happened to me, and has happened a lot, is that I used to be very terrified of public speaking. And so when I started, I took Toastmasters, and that did help, but I would go to improv. And at the end of every improv class, I was like, now I could get in front of a group. I felt very energized. I felt very present. I felt very alive. It changed my entire work life. It got me being able to get out from being very shy in front of groups of people to being able to facilitate and talk. So I would say right there, just even taking an improv class, if anyone has any presentation shyness, that because it breaks your patterns. It creates new neural pathways constantly. You're constantly creating new neural pathways in your brain, and in that you get then more alert and more present, more energized, more dynamic, and you have access to more ideas. So how it helps with sales, it helps people, it depends what their particular objectives are, but I've worked with improv for sales teams, and a lot of times it's helped them think on their feet and respond and adapt. So they have a presentation, they're presenting something to the client, and the client gives all these objectives. And rather than get stuck They're more free to, immediately, if you practice, it's sort of practicing being spontaneous, practicing being adaptive. If you practice it, they immediately come up with a new idea. They don't get tripped up when something doesn't go as planned. I will say that is true for almost everyone I know that's done a lot of improv. You develop a different relationship to things that don't go as planned. So you become very resilient and adaptive, and less constrained with the fear of mistakes, and more confident in being able to be resilient. And I think that transfers to leadership, sales, marketing, everything. So it's not just more ideas, it's a way of being that allows you to not constrict, contract in the face of adversity or something not going well, or an objection you don't know how to handle.
Yeah, it sounds like it's you get to flex the adaptive
Yeah.
adaptive muscles.
Yeah. And and it and it we also have an internal evaluator that's on all the time. All of us do. When someone tries something and you don't know almost how much we tend not to know how much our internal evaluator is going good, bad, right, wrong, safe, unsafe, all these things throughout the day until you get into doing some kinds of improv warm-ups or improv activities where the constraint of the game is things might have to happen so fast that the evaluator can't keep up. And so eventually it's sort of like tricking the evaluator. There's no way to play the game with the evaluator on board. So you learn how to not let the evaluator run the show, but to let what the objectives, the goals happen. And so I think one of the ways I really value improv in my own life, and I know this is true from other colleagues, is that it you take more creative risks and you follow more what you're going for. And if something doesn't work out, you see it not as much of a failure as much as, oh, that's an iteration to what will work out. Okay, oh, it didn't work out there, turn here and go here, turn here and go here. And so the improv just gives you that nimble, the more adaptive, you bounce back, or I bounce back more quickly after improv than I used to before. I used to be, oh, why did I do that? I'd start getting into very judgmental places.
One of the things that we have at my job as sort of a guiding virtue is that getting it wrong is the fastest path to getting it right. So it's like, don't be afraid of failure because you learn from that failure and then you learn to get to something faster than if you're just stuck trying to only get the right answer the first time. So I think that sort of resonates very well with me.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Getting it wrong is the path to getting it right. I think that's brilliant. That's great. Yeah, absolutely. And it's almost like you can't not, if you want to create something or innovate, or you can't not get something wrong along the way. If you're worried, if you don't have a relationship to where it's okay for you to get something wrong, you're going to be very limited in what you will try. You're going to go down a very narrow pathway that's very safe. If it's okay for you to say, hey, getting it wrong is just a step to getting it right, or, oh, this doesn't work out, something, in improv, there's a game, new choice. You try something, someone says new choice. You try something else, new choice, and you try something. You do that enough, you stop worrying about a lack of choices. Sometimes, there's an abundance mentality, is an abundance of possibilities, an abundance of ideas. I saw the singer Ed Sheeran, he was talking to somebody and he was saying people always ask him how come he can be so creative and always create all these new songs. And he said it's just because he does it every day. He makes the time to do it every day. And he said so many of them are not good. Like they're the ones we never hear. But he's just not afraid to not make not good songs. And I've heard that about Picasso. So many of his works weren't anything he would ever show. We only see the best of what someone puts out. But I would say one of the ways to overcome the fear of being wrong is in low risks, low stakes environment just for yourself. Allow yourself places where you can be wrong and you shift it to, all right, new choice. So what would that, or that's an iteration, what can I learn from that? That's great. Yeah.
My example of that, literally yesterday, well, 2 days ago and then yesterday. So 2 days ago, we tried to make a fort with the kids, and we like had blankets up and sheets and all this stuff, and everything kept falling down. It was too heavy. And then I was like, sorry, kids, we'll have to come back to this tomorrow. And then yesterday I was like, oh, I got it. We're going to run some string from the ceiling. And like now you should see the fort that we have. It is humongous and the kids love it. And it was like, I wouldn't have known that I needed to use the string until I tried to hang the sheets up, and like the whole thing fell apart. So it was just a good example of where tried something, didn't work, pivot, and now the kids are having a blast.
Exactly. And at 100, oh, that's a great example. And something emerged, unplanned and unexpected, that was greater than what you had entered with. You hadn't had that, for idea until you went through the iterations. And if you look at, the good news is we are actually designed that way to explore, experiment, and not get, if you look at kids and how they learn, right? When they're first learning to walk and then they fall, they never would think, oh, guess I'm just not designed to walk, or I'm just not a good walker. It wouldn't even occur to them. They just get back up. They laugh. It's fun. It's like, they learn through exploring, experimenting. Oh, and they touch this, it's hot, don't do that. And touch that, it's sort of new choice all the time. Explore and experiment and make different choices. So we have nature on our side. We've just been very socialized and sort of educated into a more good, bad, right, wrong, binary school system. And the good news about creativity and improv and any of these various methods is we already have it in us. Everyone's already fully creative. It's just kind of unlearning all the things that kind of blocked our natural exploratory creative nature.
So leading off of that a little bit, let's say that you are a leader of people at a company, and you need to get people sort of out of that wiring into their creativity to be able to boost the team, the company, etc. What sort of practical tips can you give that'll help that team leader get the most creativity out of their people?
Sure. Okay. First of all, what I would do, and I totally recommend, and that is something to break the pattern, whether it's just a short warm up, whether it's standing up, moving the body a little bit, whether it's getting people in pairs and just having them share something, a story of something that happened, or something from their, something so that breaks the pattern because it changes the energy. And creativity is very much connected. There's creative energy. We've all heard, the creative energy is, it's sort of like something that breaks our pattern allows more creative energy to move through us, move through our brains, move through. And so I would say anything, break patterns. Sometimes also, if you tend to think in a certain way, a great way to get a team co-creating together is building something together with literally objects. Let's say this was, this, and then this was something else, and you could build, the Lego Serious Play is its own, they build, that's a whole way of imagining and co-creating together. But you can do it with objects that you bring in, and people start, so going from abstract, more right brain, divergent, abstract space, and then extracting meaning and looking at it. What is that? What does it look like? I know I've worked with engineers where we would do, and this line at a time drawing comes from improv theater, where they were designing a smart product, and they drew it literally one line at a time, in groups of five. It did not look anything like the real product that they wanted to design, but that was the right brain, kind of divergent, like just do it. And then they have something in front of them. They so started saying, okay, so what does that mean? And they started saying, well, this looks like this. And they started then going into more left brain, listing and writing out everything they saw in it. They were going from abstract to concrete. Then, when they had all the concrete ideas, they clustered them into groups and and then some they diverged more out on, and others they converged more. But all of a sudden, new things happened just from going into the visual right brain abstract first before they went into the left brain. Those are just two of hundreds of thousands of ways of doing it, but building it or visualizing it, and a little at a time, and letting it be okay that the thing you are creating can be abstract, and then you go, so imagine how we would apply this to what we're going to create, and then you start looking like that.
And maybe this is a good time to plug a book full of tips on how you could, maximize a creative environment for your team.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm happy to plug it. So I did have my new book out, Pattern Breaks, a facilitator's guide to cultivating creativity. You can get it on Amazon and other online resellers. And it is all about, it has 18 templates of a variety of different pattern breaking activities. It has mindsets. It has some philosophies, framing, and troubleshooting, ways to what happens when things go awry. And you can, my website, so that's at patternbreaks.com or Amazon. You could just find it there. And then my company website's creativeemergence.com. And if you can write me at info at Creative Emergence if you have any questions on anything.
I have a few ideas I'd love to talk to you about after this.
We will make sure that everybody has the right links and they know how to get in touch with you and where to find the book. But Michelle, we want to thank you so much for taking the time with us today. That was an absolutely invigorating conversation. All of that stuff is super cool. I'm looking forward to trying to take some of that into practice in my own job and see what we can start to come up with creatively.
Oh, thank you guys. It was an absolute joy and pleasure to be here with you. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Until next time, everybody, be well.